Spellchecker by Katy Haye. It was hard to make a living when you had enough magic to be sensitive to the stuff, but not enough to do anything truly useful with it. Zendro thought he'd found a good balance, all things considered. Zendro Finestaff, Spellchecker, was written in silver paint over his doorway. He wasn't the most powerful mage in the kingdom, wasn't even in the top 50%, but he managed. The Thursday when he met Henry started ordinarily. It was Thursday, and just like clockwork, Goodwife Stafford knocked on his door mid-morning. Zendro smiled brightly. "Good morning. What can I do for you today?" Goodwife Stafford was his most regular customer. He'd be devastated when she finally finished clearing out her attic and had nothing more to bring him. The goodwife beamed as she stepped inside. "I found something in the attic. I want to make sure it's safe to keep in the house." Zendro took her through to his office so they could be comfortable. Goodwife Stafford sat down with an expression of suppressed excitement and set her item on the desk. As ever, it was swathed in a scarf to protect it, and maintain the element of surprise. Zendro took his own seat and leaned forward. "May I?" he asked, hands poised over the thick knot. "Please?" He unwrapped the cloth to find a paperweight. "It's very beautiful," he said approvingly. There was zero magic emitting from the item, which was clearly just a trinket put away after a house clearance, and rediscovered largely due to Goodwife Stafford's boredom now she was alone in the house. "But is it safe?" she asked in hushed tones. Zendro always liked to give his customers a bit of a show. He frowned as he passed a hand over the object, back and forth. After a few passes he let his hand touch the glass ball. His eyes met Goodwife Stafford's and he gave a reassuring smile. "It's safe." He picked it up, turning the orb over and peering into its depths. "Quite safe," he promised. He handed it back. "It'll look beautiful in your home." "Thank you," Goodwife Stafford beamed at him. "You've set my mind at rest, I can tell you. I'd hate to have had to throw it away, but you can't be too careful." "Very wise, and I'm always happy to check for you." "What do I owe you?" "I'm sorry to have to charge you," he said, which he was, but since the rent was due in 3 days' time and he was currently short, he wasn't so sorry that he'd check her items for free. No, you deserve to be paid for your expertise," Goodwife Stafford replied. "A shilling will do nicely," Zendro said, the way he did every week. The goodwife pressed a shiny coin into his hand and left with a satisfied smile, the paperweight cradled to her chest. As Zendro walked her to the door, he saw a second customer was waiting in the hallway. A stranger, tall and rangy. Zendro said goodbye to Goodwife Stafford, then turned to give his full attention to the newcomer. He was about Zendro's age, but looked as though life had treated him with far less care. Zendro's business was sometimes precarious, but it was light work that kept him out of the elements. His customer had a scar running at an angle across his forehead, a tooth missing, weathered skin and calloused hands. Zendro noted the scabbard hanging at his side. Sword for hire. No chance he'd become a regular customer. And it might depend how recently he'd been paid as to how well he'd be able to pay for Zendro's skills. Still, he was here, and anything was possible. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked. "My sword keeps going blunt." The mercenary swept up a hand to silence an argument Zendro hadn't formulated yet. "And yes, of course I care for it properly." He gave a look that was 3/4 glare, challenging Zendro to object. "That seems strange," Zendro said instead, because his business relied on strange. There was no money in someone who'd let his sword go blunt through incompetence. Besides which, this man didn't look incompetent. He looked deadly. He'd survived this long for a start. "I think it's been hexed," the stranger said. "Come through and I'll take a look." The stranger, who gave his name as Henry, followed Zendro and sprawled into the seat recently vacated by Goodwife Stafford. The effect was entirely different. Henry filled the room, feet sticking out either side of the desk as Zendro crossed to take his own seat. "May I see the patient?" He held out both hands. Of course." Henry shifted and slid the sword smoothly from its scabbard, twisting it with a flick of his wrist to set it gently across Zendro's palms. Zendro swallowed. Definitely not incompetent. He sat down, setting the sword carefully on the desk and wafting his hands over it. "Are you working locally?" he asked. There were wisps of magic clinging to the metal, something insubstantial, certainly nothing enough to cause a problem. "I was in service to Lord Wychmore, until my sword started failing. I plan to head to the mountains. There's always fights to be had there." Zendro glanced up and caught the man's grin as he said that. It shaved years off him. Zendro returned his attention to the sword. As far as he could make out, there probably had been some kind of a hex, but a cheap, poor quality one like he'd be able to produce, to be honest, and it had already worn off. Hendry had just needed a bit more patience. But telling him that wouldn't pay Zendro's rent, and a man heading for the mountains would be miles away before he realised he'd been swindled, if he ever did. "There is a hex," he stated gravely, "but the good news is I can fix it, and for much less than a new sword." Hendry set his elbows on the desk and leaned forward. The room shrank a little more. "That's great news. I'd hate to have to replace this sword. It's a part of me." 6 shillings to resolve the problem. Hendry dug immediately into his purse. He really did like his sword. Zendro felt a moment of guilt, but pushed it away. He could give the guy peace of mind, and that was nearly as good as actually removing a hex. "Give me 5 minutes. Please be silent. It requires absolute concentration." "I can stay." Hendry's eyes widened. They were the grey of storm clouds. Zendro smiled. "I wouldn't part you from your beloved sword." He needed Hendry more than he needed the sword for this spell, but he didn't plan to give away his secrets. Hendry set his hands, broad and tanned, on the desk so the sword lay between them. He really was perfect for Zendro's spellcasting. Zendro began to mutter one of the 3 incantations he could manage with his feeble magical powers. This one made people feel better, a general satisfaction with life, and confidence that all was well. It would last a day, maybe 2, and Hendry would be long gone by the time it wore off. For effect, Zendro waved his hands over the sword, wishing he'd put on proper robes for this. He muttered to a crescendo and finished, eyes settling on Hendry. "It's done." Hendry's fists clenched. "It's fixed. The hex has gone. When you sharpen it next, it'll hold its edge." Hendry got to his feet. He looked as though he might hug Zendro, and the spellchecker wondered if he'd overdone the spell. "Thank you." He lifted the weapon from the table and stared admiringly down its length, although there was nothing new to see. He threw another smile at Hendro. He really was very cheerful for a soldier. "I'll tell all my friends." Zendro was torn as to whether that would be a good thing or not. "Great. Always pleased to see a happy customer." A month later, Zendro's heart lurched when he opened his door to find Hendry on the doorstep. His thoughts spun with dire possibilities. The man had realised he was a fraud, had returned to wreak vengeance, was about to gut Zendro with the sword he hadn't mended. Why had he tried to swindle a man who knew his way around a sword? He must have been mad. His mouth was dry, but he forced a smile. "Can I help? Again?" He did his best to speak lightly, as though he'd be as surprised as Hendry was if something had gone wrong with his hex clearing. He might even have succeeded, because Hendry smiled brightly in return, the creases in his forehead smoothing out as though he'd reached a safe haven. "The sword works perfectly." He shook his head, his expression one of pleased awe. "I don't know what was in that charm, but it's held its edge perfectly ever since." "Oh." Zendro tugged his smile up a notch, because he wasn't above taking credit for something absolutely not his work. "I'm pleased to hear that." He cleared his throat, seeing an opportunity springing to life, like a great shining ball of warmth and the ability to cover the rent before it was overdue. "Is there something else I can help you with?" "Well," Hendry ducked his head, cheeks pinking. Zendro wondered idly if he was doing it on purpose to look winsome. It was a good look on the man. "It's a bit silly." Zendro threw the door wide. "You're my only customer. Come inside and tell me in private." Hendry's eyebrows flashed and he followed, almost tripping on Zendro's heels. "How were the mountains?" As they settled on either side of the desk, Zendro noticed again how Hendry dominated the small room, sprawling in his seat. He probably looked magnificent on the battlefield. Hendry's bright smile flashed again. "You remembered." "Most of my customers are local. You stood out." "Ah, I see." Hendry's fingers drummed on the desk. "I need your help." "With what?" "My saddle." "Your saddle?" Hendry shifted again, glancing down. "It's really uncomfortable." Zendro tried to put the pieces together. "You think it's been hexed?" "It's possible." Hendry spoke defensively. Zendro threw up his hands. "It's absolutely possible." "But did you bring it with you?" "It's at my lodgings. Do you do home visits?" I guess. Hendry's lodgings were half a mile away. He led the way easily through the streets, keeping the conversation going with tales of battle, which sounded much more entertaining than Zendro supposed they'd been at the time. At the Bright Sun Inn, Hendry led him to the stables behind the main building. The place smelled of hay and straw and horses. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunshine. "Here," Hendry slapped a hand on a leather saddle looped over the edge of a stall. "Is something the matter with it?" This was the strangest consultation Zendro had ever been a party to. He stepped up to the saddle since he didn't really know what else to do. Hendry had been so pleased with his sword that he'd returned, under what seemed like the flimsiest pretence. Zendro set a hand on the leather. There was absolutely nothing. He'd have been surprised by anything different. What kind of a freak would enchant someone's saddle? He could pretend to fix a non-existent hex, but the same deceit twice? That would be tempting fate. He turned to find Hendry watching him with a strange intensity. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with the saddle, or not magically, at least. Perhaps you could take it to a saddler? Perhaps, some stuffing fell out or something." Hendry smiled, warm and lopsided, a flash of gap showing where his tooth was missing. "I'm sorry to have wasted your time." Something was going on. Zendro just wasn't sure what. "It's not a problem. I'm just sorry I can't help." "How about I buy you dinner to make up for it?" "You don't have to do that." Hendry rubbed the back of his neck. "No, but I'd like to, if you'd like." "Oh!" Pennies cascaded around Zendro. "You came all the way back here just to ask me on a date?" Well, yes." Silence fell. Light filtered through the shutters and turned Hendry's hair to bronze. Zendro wished he'd never swindled this handsome man. He'd taken too long to answer. Hendry swallowed and looked away. "Forget it. Stupid idea. I didn't mean to make you feel awkward." Zendro closed the space between them. No. That's very sweet of you. I'd love to have dinner." He bit his lip and stirred up all his courage. "But I do need to tell you something about the day we met. You can be mad. I deserve it. Just remember you were a stranger then." Hendry's expression turned hopeful. "But I'm not now." Zendro smiled. "I guess that depends on what you want after you hear my confession." "All right. Let's get a drink, and you can tell me all about how you swindled me out of 6 shillings. Zendro gaped. "You knew?" Hendry lifted a shoulder. "I suspected. You just confirmed it. I might be hard muscle, but I'm not completely stupid." You don't mind?" "If you were less cute, maybe I would." Zendro warmed from head to toe. He hoped he wasn't blushing. "Well, I guess it's good I'm cute." Hendry tucked his arm through Zendro's. "Very good," he agreed. That was Spellchecker by Katy Haye. If you like these stories, please hit like and subscribe and you'll be notified when a new video is posted up. Thanks for listening.